All right. Welcome to the Munro Live podcast. Today, we have a special guest, Farzad, and you are an amazing creator in the Tesla space, but more than the Tesla space, the EV space. Recently, Elon Musk just started following you. We were just talking about that. It's got to be pretty wild. I think you have, 76,000 followers on Twitter, and your channel is really growing. Right. Yeah, but I want to get into your history. So you're at Tesla for a while, and then you transitioned into this creator space. You now live in Austin. You have an amazing producer, and I'd like to maybe start off there and let me know a little bit more about you.
Sure, man. Yeah, thank you for having me on. Munro Live is something I've been following for years, man, ever since you guys started putting out content with Sandy tearing down the Model 3. It's just been an awesome resource, and really thank you and to the entire Munro team for all the work that you guys do. It's truly an honor to be part of the sort of Munro Live podcast, and it's very, very cool to be on. I was telling you before, I'm having imposter syndrome because I'm like, what? Like, why am I here? You're the one who comes on my channel. So it truly is an honor. I'm very, very flattered. Thank you so much, Cory. Yeah. I really respect you and the team. Yeah, no truly. For me, yeah, it's a little bit about me. So I started sort of my career in business intelligence and analytics back 10, 11, 12 years ago, however long that was after I graduated college. And joining Tesla was sort of an accidental thing that happened back in 2017, where I was an executive at a distribution company called Phillips Pepper Supplies, and I was being mentored. Just so lucky to have the mentorship that I did at that company with Blaine and Cheryl and Jess and Brian and all those guys. Just incredible mentorship. Declan, they taught me so much. And I'm forever grateful for that experience there. But there was a transitional period at the time for the company, for Philips, where they were looking to move their headquarters down to North Carolina, Charlotte. And then my wife and I were like, okay, do we want to move down to North Carolina, or should we look around and see, what kind of opportunities are there locally here in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, where I used to live? And I had been a Tesla investor for about 5 years at that time, owned the Model S, was super passionate about the company. And just by happenstance, there was an opening for a position at their local distribution facility they opened about a month prior, or like 2 months prior or something. And I was like, okay, this is probably a typo. They probably meant to put this somewhere else. There's no way little Bethlehem, Pennsylvania is going to, have a Tesla facility. That's crazy. But it turned out to be true. I sort of gave them my resume, and they were like, yeah, you sound like a good fit. Come on board, or come on for a discussion with the leadership team at the distribution company. I went there. I met the leadership group there. It was just, we hit it off right away. And then 4.5 years later, the rest is history. It was just an incredible time there. I learned so much. I still have a lot of friends that I met through that experience at Tesla. It really taught me so many lessons around just trying your absolute best in situations that seem impossible, to really trust your teammates, to surround yourself with the smartest people that you can, to never give up. I can go on and on and on with the things that I learned at that company. And then after I left the company, with financial security and time and sort of like a lot of fulfillment, I felt like the universe sort of aligned perfectly for me to go into the next chapter of my life. I stumbled on this YouTube thing just out of just fun. Like, I worked at Tesla. I've been an investor for a long time. I figure people probably value my takes on some of the things around the company. And lo and behold, a year and a half later, this is like something, it's a job, but it's not really a job. It's something that I just do every day. And it's turned into something that is incredibly fulfilling. And I feel so lucky and grateful to be able to do it. And it's unbelievable. I'm just riding a wave that the universe is sort of putting me on, and now I'm on Munro Live podcast. It's like, what the hell? So yeah, man, that's a little bit about me.
Yeah, and so describe your move to Austin. So Austin is now like the epicenter of Tesla events, between the investor day that just happened. There's the shareholder meeting coming up. The year before, there was a cyber rodeo. Now, when I go to Austin, I look forward to meeting up with you and a bunch of other people. So how has that move been? And what does it feel like being at that epicenter?
It feels special. It feels really special. We ended up here in 2020 during the COVID pandemic. it was sort of in tandem with the Gigafactory opening. I had been at Tesla at that time. I was still living in Bethlehem at the time. But one of the things I wanted to do was move a little bit closer to the manufacturing process. I felt like the sort of the supply chain, the distribution business was becoming heavily reliant on the manufacturing side quite a bit because Tesla internalizes so much of their components that I was like, okay, so it kind of makes sense to sort of get somebody from the distribution side to be closer to the factory so that we can have a better relationship with each other to streamline our processes. And it just made sense for me to kind of start going that direction. And it was the first or second quarterly earnings call. I think it was the first one. Elon announced that they were opening that factory in Austin, and I went to my boss, and I'm like, "Dude, would you be open if I relocate to Austin? Whenever, even before before the factory opens, or while the factory is opening, to sort of start transitioning into more sort of hybrid role between distribution and manufacturing to sort of help move that stuff along." He's like, "Yeah, sure. We'll sort of go with the process and see what happens." And then my wife and I took a trip down to Austin in, what was it, August of 2020, with the intention of just finding the just different things that the city offered, the vibe, if it was a good fit for us. And then we landed there on a Friday, or it was a Thursday, and then that Sunday we put in an offer for a house. And I called my boss on Monday, and I'm like, "Hey, remember how we were talking about, this being sort of a long-term transition? Yeah, I kind of put an offer in a house. So can I do this way faster?" And he's like, "Holy okay, I guess. Yeah, go for it." So that's how I ended up in Austin. And yeah, I had a feeling that it was going to become some sort of epicenter, sort of like they call it like the Mecca for Tesla, right? Austin, Texas. Just how much land Tesla purchased here. I think it's like 2,300 acres or 27, some ridiculous amount of land. It was going to be their largest facility in the world with the Gigafactory, Texas. We knew that Elon was moving a lot of his operations from California to Texas. Austin is a booming city, one of the fastest growing cities in the United States, has a really cool vibe. A lot of tech companies are coming here. They also have a lot of land. And so it's a great spot for suppliers and tier 1, 2s, and 3s to set up shop here. Super business friendly. So it just made a lot of sense. So that kind of got our ball rolling to move down here. And like you said, just so many events are here now that are related to Tesla, Gigafact, the Texas opening, the Cyber Rodeo, the shareholder meeting, the investor day. Seems like every major event is here. And again, just kind of lucky that kind of played out. But at the same time, it does seem like Tesla's moving a lot of its sort of large scale events and things out here in Texas. And I'm lucky to be here. And I'm very excited to see how it grows over time. I think it has a lot of potential.
Yeah, and beyond just Tesla, you follow other manufacturers very closely as well. You were just tweeting extensively about the Q1 results for Ford. So the transition to electrification is and will be a long journey. And some people are predicting 2030, the crossover point 2028, 2035. There's a lot of regulation where you're no longer going to be able to buy an internal combustion engine vehicle in, I think, 5 or 6 states in the United States. So can you give me your opinion, your general opinion on where we're at in this transition? Will it accelerate? And what are the economic headwinds for some of these OEMs based on Ford's Q1 results for Model E?
Yeah, for sure. It's funny you ask that question because I actually rely on Munro quite a bit to get a really good understanding of how sort of the challenges are from an engineering and manufacturing perspective for these OEMs. You guys do such a great job bringing that to light for the public through your videos and your expertise. I think sort of my opinion is that I think there are certain OEMs and legacy automakers that are more ahead of the game than others. I think folks like Ford, the Hyundai Group with Hyundai and Kia, maybe even Volkswagen with their ID4 and sort of the amount of EVs they're selling globally. These are some of the automakers that stand out to me that seem to be a little bit further ahead of the game versus everybody else, like a Ram, for example, or a Jeep Chrysler. That's very, I don't think they're making EVs at all. They have some in the pipeline to produce in 2024, but they're not really making any. GM just discontinued its most affordable model in the Bolt, and if you sort of strip that out of their 2023 sales, they've only really sold 1,000 EVs in the first quarter between the whereas the Lyriq and the Hummer EV. And so there is a transitional phase that the legacy automakers are going to have to go through that is very reminiscent of a book called The Innovator's Dilemma, which is sort of this story arc that says folks that are, or companies that are well entrenched in a technology that has been around for a long time are going to have a very difficult time transitioning to a new technology if a disruptor comes to play that is able to outmaneuver them from the perspective of technology and scale and how quickly they can move. And so, the whole thing is going to be, how can traditional OEMs sort of wind down their gas car business as the EV transition takes hold, while ramping up a EV business that's going to be unprofitable for years to come. And we saw this in Ford's Q1 earnings for 2023, ever since they broke out their electric vehicle segment, their Pro segment, which is the commercial, and the Blue segment, which is the gas car business. This is something Ford did that was super brave, and Jim Farley deserves a ton of credit, and that leadership team deserves a lot of credit to sort of lead that effort. But we see firsthand, first quarter of 2023, Ford's EV margins were negative 102%, and they sold 12,000 units in the first quarter. Now, a lot of that was through planned shutdowns in the factory for Mach-E, and some of the diagnosing they had to do around the F-150 Lightning battery fire that they had in their plant, which was the right thing to do. But it really highlights just because an automaker has been making gas cars forever doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to have an easier path to growing their EV business in relation to a newcomer, like, say, a Tesla, who sort of had to endure 10 plus years from inception of a grueling scaling process to be able to offer mass market affordable EVs at a profit. And if you sort of put their progress side by side with a Ford or a GM or any other player, it seems like these companies might be maybe 5 to 10 years behind where Tesla is, on sort of that path. Maybe some even, haven't even started yet. And so the question becomes, with a dealership network that doesn't really seem to like to sell EVs because they don't have as much maintenance, and they're not really incentivized to sell something that won't make them money in the long term with maintenance. And sort of the UAW, which is the United Auto Workers Union, that just yesterday came out sort of not in favor of some of the EV incentives that the U.S. government has put in place, which I think is just sort of they're haggling a little bit for the renegotiation stuff that's going to happen this year. But you can kind of see there's blockades. The legacy automakers have to navigate that complicated sort of variable of the UAW and the dealership network, in addition to ramp up an EV segment that's going to be very difficult and requires a lot of innovation and pace. And so, I think there's a real concern, and I think Sandy and you have painted sort of, what could happen if legacy automakers don't jump on this EV wagon as quickly as possible and as profitably as possible, that a lot of them could be in really big trouble. And I think we're starting to see some of the beginning stuff starting to happen, at least in that journey, with an example like Ford and their Model E business. But, there's a lot to be seen. I think one thing is for sure is that the EV adoption is accelerating, and automakers will need to jump on that train. They have no other choice. They literally have no other choice, because if they don't, that basically means a shrinking business that will be a fraction of what they used to be. And in a worst case scenario, they won't exist. And I don't think any of us want that.
Yeah, when we talked a while back, I think it was on your podcast, I mentioned how Apple phones, so the introduction of the iPhone rocked the cell phone world and essentially put Nokia and Motorola nearly out of business because they got rid of all the buttons. It was a complete change in how a phone was used by a human being. And really, that's what everybody has today. It's quite incredible. I think the culture and the passionate fan base, I wouldn't even call it fan base, the passionate following of Tesla as a brand is incredible. And if another OEM made a vehicle with the exact same stats as a Model Y, same size, same shape, same storage, same range, same everything, but it was a a Chevy. Let's just say it's a Chevrolet model 3.5. I don't know, something. It's literally identical. Would it outsell a Model Y? I don't think so, because you don't have that the way that you buy the vehicle online. They would still use their dealership network. I feel like it's beyond the product itself, and it's the culture surrounding the brand and what's built up behind Tesla. So what's your thought on that fervent following of Tesla as a brand and how that's kind of blasting through into the future?
I think that's a great point. It's a great point that's sort of underestimated by folks that might be viewing the Tesla dynamic and the EV transition sort of at a surface level. There's definitely something to be said there. I think Tesla benefits tremendously from having somebody like an Elon Musk at the helm that is very good at creating passion and excitement about technological feats and about the future. Very Steve Jobs in a way. It's sort of a visionary leader that just makes a lot of people excited. I think that's even with his quirks and his sort of weaknesses from a public speaking perspective, the dude just makes you excited to think about the future, and he does a really good job. He needs to be commended for that, for sure. But I do think there's something about the Tesla brand itself that does inspire people to want to support the company more than, say, like a GM or a Ford customer would. I think there is definitely something to be said for your lifelong F-150 buyers or your Silverado buyers. We all know the acronyms that people have come up with for, Ford fix or repair daily, and Chevys have another one or something. And I'm not speaking about the reliability. I just know that's sort of the culture that lives there. But the Tesla story has this long-term vision of transitioning the world towards a sustainable future with what seems like a leader in Elon Musk that really cares about that mission himself and is sort of leading that from the front. I think the fact that there's so much coverage about his work ethic and his passion really helps strengthen the brand, and it's really proved by the fact that the car like the Tesla Model Y in the United States for the first quarter of 2023, it was the best-selling non-pickup truck period in the United States with zero advertising. It sold something like 85,000 units, I forget, in the US in the first quarter, and the RAV4 sold maybe 1,000 less. But just think about that dynamic for a second. You have a car that doesn't or a company that doesn't advertise in the United States selling a car that averages around $50,000 per car. That's an electric vehicle only from Tesla and tied to this Elon Musk character, outselling the Toyota RAV4 that has a reputation for being extremely affordable and reliable and safe. So, and that speaks to that support. That speaks to that support. And they will continue. I think that support will continue to pull Tesla through the rest of the decade as they release their Cybertruck and their compact car. And it's something that no other company has. Other companies, in my opinion, would have to make up that very passionate fan base by offering ridiculously good products that hopefully they can make money on. But that's a tall order. And we'll see if other companies can get there, especially legacy automakers. But it's going to be hard, man. It's going to be hard. You don't get to almost 2 million cars per year at the current rate in 2023 with zero advertising, with your average selling prices being around $45,000 to $50,000 without something special. And I think Tesla has that it factor that no other car maker has.
This episode of the Munro Live podcast is brought to you by T-Wraps. Hey, Sandy, did you know that T-Wraps is a family-owned business just like Munro & Associates? They're EV owners and enthusiasts turned entrepreneurs.
That's right, Cory. These people know EVs, so they take the time to create products that fit precisely into your vehicle. We got products from T-Wraps here at Munro for the F-150 Lightning and our Model 3. I gotta say, these things are really high quality.
Yep, that's true, Sandy. T-Wraps makes everything from protective films to organizing trays, and everything fits perfectly to your EV, whether you've got a Tesla, a Rivian, or a Ford. Plus, T-Wraps uses the highest quality materials in the industry, and they're all designed and produced right here in the USA.
You said it, Cory. And T-Wraps has video showcasing the quick and easy installation of each product, So DIY car upgrades have never been easier.
Visit TWraps.com to browse their collection of EV protectors and accessories. That's TWRAPS.com and use discount code Munro for 10% off your order. Yeah, and I was looking at a chart looking at how much profit Tesla made last year. I believe it was a $12 or $13 billion in profit on $75 billion of revenue. And you have Toyota and VW, which are about $250 billion in revenue, but much smaller percentage of profit. And it's incredible to think that that's going to grow again, where they'll probably be over $100 billion in revenue this year. I don't know the math, 2 million. Yeah, 2 million vehicles.
Pretty close.
Yeah. And if they keep their profit margin above 13, 14, 15%, because they were at 16% last year, that's a tremendous amount of profit. Now you're making almost as much profit in total dollars as some of these big behemoths because they're so profitable. And it's quite incredible to think that in 2018 and 19, they were really struggling to ramp up any meaningful production on the Model 3 alone, and now they have the 3 and the Y. So what's your thoughts on Project Highland, the reintroduction of the Model 3, and how do you think that'll spike the sales of the Model 3? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, Highland is an interesting one because it's something that's been rumored to be in the works for quite a while now. Coincidentally, Tesla just unveiled or re-released rather, the Model 3 long range in the States, which is something that they paused on in August of last year in 2022, citing sort of not enough cells to build the car. And now, as they're sort of alleviating that supply constraint, they've reintroduced that model, but it doesn't appear to be the Highland. I think the Highland, and I would love to hear your take on this, and I think we talked about it briefly too when you came on my channel. Well, I think it's geared towards reducing the cost of the Model 3 as much as humanly possible so that they can create better differentiation between it and the Model Y and the compact car that's been rumored to be released somewhere in the next, say, 12 to 24 months. I think Tesla needs to take those steps. You also have to remember that the Model 3 is based on the sort of manufacturing process, primarily based on the 2016, 2017 line that they built out of Fremont, which Munro, when you guys tore it down, Sandy correctly called kind of a piece of crap. But then once you got into the internals, you were like, holy crap, here's where the game-changing nature is. But a lot of those inefficiencies are still going to exist in that process until they do some sort of major overhaul of how they're building it. So I think Highland is going to be primarily focused on that, which could mean that Model 3 prices will come down maybe on the order of, you say, somewhere between $1,000 to $3,000, the costs, which I think will create better differentiation between the Model Y and the Model 3 and could spur some additional demand. In addition to a revised front, they'll do sort of like the nips and tucks in the body. I mean, last time the Model 3 looks exactly the same than it did 7 years ago. So it's definitely due for some sort of tweak. Maybe they'll refresh some of the trim internally. But that's how I'm thinking about Highland. Do you have any opinions from your end for that specific model?
So with Highland, I saw those leaked images where it showed like the new headlights and whatnot. So they should do a refresh on the exterior looks and whatnot so that it's differentiated from the Model Y on a looks perspective. Then I believe the Model Y will trail behind about 2 years to refresh their look because it came out 2.5 years after the Model 3. And I believe their next generation driveline, which I'm fairly certain I saw being installed at Giga Berlin, that'll pull significant cost out if they're able to go with hairpin motors and then that redesigned inverter in the drive unit. If they transition to using some giga castings in the Model 3s, that will help them with their ability to manufacture it quickly. When Sandy interviewed Elon in Texas, he asked him that. He said, hey, are you going to put some giga castings in the Model 3? He essentially said no, not in the near future, but he never ruled it out completely. So I think you hit the nail right on the head. To further differentiate the Model 3 from the Model Y. But most large OEMs have moved away from sedans. So you still have the Corolla and the Accord, with Honda and Toyota. And I think Kia makes a small sedan as well. But a lot of the American OEMs, they got rid of all their small cars. They went to SUVs. And I've talked about this. Other factors that are not even associated with being electric have driven up the cost of cars, not the price, the cost. Primarily the safety standards, the amount of ultra high strength steel needed to pass some of these tests, like small overlap rigid barrier test, roof crush test. The FMVS 226 ejection mitigation test requires airbags that deploy below the belt line. So when you drive a brand new vehicle, there's thousands and thousands of dollars of added high-strength steel and airbags and all these other safety features that really weren't even in cars in the early 2000s, late 90s, early 90s. And people will pay more for an SUV, even though it's only very incrementally more expensive than a car. So a Model 3 versus a Model Y, it doesn't have that much more steel. It's a very tiny amount more cost. The batteries are the same, the motors are the same, the seats are the same, a lot of the instrument panels are the same, the height and the width, and it just grows a little bit, but people will pay more for an SUV. So seeing traditional OEMs abandon their small cars because it's a huge amount of effort to design them, it's a huge amount of engineering, and then you have to do all this work, and then you go sell it at a tiny profit margin when you can sell a truck for a profit margin that could be 10 or 20 times more than that. So from a business perspective, selling cars is not what you want to do. Selling small cars is not what you want to do if you want to make money. So with Tesla launching the Cybertruck, I think that's going to be really good for their profitability. And the super compact car will only be good if they can reach that tremendous scale, which allows them to get the cost as low as possible. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. If you make a small car and people aren't buying it, you should probably just stop. So I think Tesla will have the demand for their whatever they call their little compact car, what is it, Model 2 or something. And it'll be interesting to see this transition. And over the next, I don't think 12 to 24 months, I don't think we'll see a compact car from Tesla. They seem to, under-promise and over-deliver, and they under-deliver.
Over-promise and under-deliver. They did literally the opposite.
They promise and don't deliver. And the Cybertruck's been delayed and delayed and delayed and delayed and delayed.
Yeah, deliver late.
Yeah, they're late. So I don't think I'll see a compact Tesla in this building for a teardown until 2026 at the earliest. Okay. That's my opinion. Okay. And I hope we get a Cybertruck this year, probably be next year. So what's your thoughts on Tesla and their delays and their development? And frankly, I think that the large OEMs are so delayed, like GM barely making anything, that's actually buying Tesla even more time.
Yeah, that's a great question. I one of the key criticisms of Tesla, which I think is valid, is that they set these timelines that they rarely hit. And Elon Musk himself has been very open about how that's kind of his thing. He's over optimistic by nature. He sets overly ambitious deadlines, and more often than not, they miss them. I mean, the best example of that is full self-driving. They've been promising a full self-driving sort of complete offering for a few number of years, and it's damn close, but it's still not there. However, I do think that we as a society tend to over punish ambition. And I think that is best seen in the case of Tesla, where anytime they miss a deadline, it's viewed as a failure. But if you really look at their track record, the things that they've failed on were just things that were late. The Model S was behind schedule by, I think, 1 or 2 years. Based on the public guidelines that Elon was giving, and it became true, and it proved that a company could be profitable. The Model X ramp was delayed by like a year. The Model 3 ramp was delayed by like a year and a half. The Model Y was 6 months early, so that was a weird sort of thing that happened. Tesla FSD has been late forever, but these core huge things that Tesla sets out that are overambitious and they are late on do come true. And the biggest one of those was reaching the 500,000 goal per year by 2020, which was deemed completely ridiculous back in 2013, 2014, when they were sort of laying out their plans for Giga Nevada, the Gigafactory in Nevada that makes the batteries today. But it came true. So I view it as just that's just the culture of the company to try and push progress as quickly as humanly possible. And they're not really, having worked there, I know this personally. I don't think folks there are really too concerned about how they're viewed by missing deadlines or being late to things, because they know that once it is achieved, they're really the only ones that can offer that combination of feature set and cost and experience, that even if they're late, it is what it is. Maybe they needed that overambitious timeline to be able to achieve the goal in the first place. And that's sort of that culture that Elon Musk brings to that company. So I think it's valid to be criticized for it, but I think sometimes they're punished for it, and that doesn't make sense to me. I think it's just, hey, they missed. It's okay, but it comes true. Give it time. It's hard. You know this. You know this yourself. It's hard to make cars, man. It's not easy. And I think highlighting that the OEMs are going through the same exact process. I mean, I hate to pick on GM, but we have that very public interview with Mary Barra, sort of promising a lot of models, more than Tesla by a certain year, more volume than Tesla by a certain year. And it's very obvious to see that that's not going to come to fruition. You don't see that level of scrutiny for OEMs, but Tesla gets it all because they're the most talked about. It's probably the most talked about company in the world. So it's just comes with the territory. But I think criticism is valid, but on the stuff that matters, they deliver, and that's ultimately what's most important.
Yeah. I'd like to get your opinion on the traditional media's view of Tesla because of Elon's kind of polarizing nature right now, with his Twitter stuff, and he's considered kind of moderate to right now, even though he champions all these green initiatives and whatnot. And right. This is my question for you. Why isn't the traditional media covering the fact that the Tesla Model Y is the top-selling vehicle in Europe, I think, of everything? Yeah. And I think even in China, I saw they sold like a huge amount in the first quarter. And now you're telling me it outsold the RAV4 in the U.S., and we have an American plant, an American company with a huge plant in China and in Germany that people are dying to work at, and it's like crickets. If this was Ford or GM, if Ford built a plant in Germany and was manufacturing, hundreds of thousands of vehicles delivering to Europe and was the top vehicle in Europe, we'd be like celebrating American pride and power. Oh my gosh, look, an American car is outselling VW in Europe, and nothing. You just don't hear it. What's your thought on that?
That's such an excellent question, Cory. If that happened with Ford, that would put Jim Farley on a pedestal, and he'd be in every commercial on TV for the next 5 years, right? And he would deserve it because he's like, yeah, you're right. You did an incredible thing for America. So here's what I've learned as a YouTuber, let's call it. I finally accepted that sort of title. I'm a YouTuber now. But one of the things that has really opened my eyes is, in reality, what I am is sort of like an independent media company. And as an independent media company, I'm getting a really good idea on what the incentive structure is for mainstream media. Everything that mainstream media does is anchored around their ability to generate revenue through advertising. And which car companies are the ones that advertise with mainstream media? Everybody except for Tesla. And so mainstream media is incentivized to cover the legacy automakers as positively as humanly possible so they don't lose out on advertising revenue. It's not their fault. That's the system that they play in. And over time, that's become really clear to me that that's the reason why Tesla doesn't seem to get the same level of positive coverage as OEMs. And they get outsized negative coverage in respects to OEMs. And we'll use like recalls as an example as well. Anytime Tesla offers or has to give a over-the-air update tied to a recall, it makes national headlines. But God forbid Stellantis or GM has to recall 50,000 trucks due to a fire, and it's like just some random article that just gets passed on through the media, doesn't catch fire. Literally, I guess. So that's one thing. And then the other thing too is that I think Tesla has captured the imagination of the general public in some sense, and it's just more profitable for mainstream media to run articles on Tesla that will, I don't know, that will sort of capture, sort of bring that revenue forward, that attention forward. And we all know the line of, what bleeds leads, right? That's one of the things that mainstream media is known for, is that if something's scary or negative or fearful or something that's salacious, that will get you 1,000 times more clicks than something that's positive and great. So that's a dynamic that mainstream media is playing in. It's unfortunate, it's really, really unfortunate. But the one thing that's positive, a positive trend, is that I think there's an overall trend for people to really gravitate more towards independent media sources like myself, Munro Live, so many other places where they can really get a much more balanced, nuanced view into what's going on. And that trend over time, I think, will become the dominant sort of force behind media and mainstream media as the old model dies out. And we've kind of seen this happen. And it's, it sucks for those mainstream media companies, but that's just the world that we live in now. So I would put my thumb on that. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but like that's where I'm coming from. It seems like that's the most likely scenario as to why Tesla gets sort of unfairly covered, I would say.
That's a really great take. And another aspect to that is I feel like oftentimes you and I, we may be criticized that we're biased towards Tesla. And at Munro, we try and be as factual as possible. And we're literally standing there with the pieces and parts of a torn down Tesla.
Right.
We take the batteries apart. We measure everything. We weigh everything. We cost everything. Sandy and I and our team of engineers are armed with tens of thousands of pieces of data. And still, they're like, oh, you're just Tesla homers or whatever. And it's like, well, wait a second, and Sandy and I, we're going to film a video very shortly on the Hummer. I posted on Twitter a picture of the Park Paul target ring from the Hummer. It's this huge piece. And Teslas don't have this parking mechanism. It's a vestigial automatic transmission park locking ring that came from vehicles with automatic transmissions. So when traditional OEMs made EVs, they took this thing from the automatic transmission and put it in park because they had all the systems set up for it. But it's like $40 per car, and Tesla's just used the electric park brake. I posted a picture of that, and it got like 300,000 impressions on Twitter, just whetting the appetite to see comparing GM versus Tesla. But I'm already, in the comments, it's like, oh, well, safety this, and they have to do it and requirements. People like coming to the defense of GM. And so I have the parts, I have the facts. Let's talk about it. And so I think we get those comments often. And so I try and be introspective to make myself look for the good in other OEMs. And I do. We had the Lucid motor in, and it's really great. The Lucid motor has a ton of really clever engineering in it. Yeah. And, frankly, I think it's incredibly power dense. And if it was in Tesla vehicles, I think it'd be even better than Tesla's, but that's in a $160,000, Lucid Air. So the powertrain kind of matches that price range. So I try and make sure I look for the good in all the other cars that we see. But sometimes it's hard to ignore the overwhelming advantage that Tesla has.
Yeah, no, it's such a brilliant point you make. I think facts and truth are not biased, and this is coming from, I would consider myself a biased person who's trying his best to not be biased. Truly, I would say Munro, you, Sandy, are the gold standard of people who call stuff for what it is. And I aspire to be that every single day. I know there are natural biases that I have as a person, but I try to fight those in the same way that you do every single day. However, facts and truth is not a bias. And so if there is data that backs up a claim behind a certain company doing better than the other ones, then people can say all they want. Like, I mean, they can say, "Oh, you're so biased. This is crazy. You're shilling for a certain company." Blah blah blah. I'm like, okay, you have every right to have that opinion, but the facts speak differently. The facts say something else, And it's just that's just the internet. Unfortunately, the internet sometimes lacks nuance, and a story as game changing as Tesla and sort of this EV transition and what's happening in the auto market. A lot of that gets lost because what's the overwhelming advantage, I can see why some people would think it's like just outright bias, but maybe it's just that overwhelming, and it's a very peculiar time in history, and that should be recognized.
Yeah. So I have a question about 2030. So a lot of people are predicting a transition. 50% EVs will be sold in 2030, 50% ICE. And I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about what will be the volume that Tesla will be selling by 2030. I believe they've stated a goal of what? 20 million?
20 million.
Do you think now, looking at Elon's goals, maybe he truly wants to be at 9 million, 13 million, 15 million, and if he sets the goal at 20 and misses, he'll be leading the world in volume. I think it'll be more than Toyota. I think Toyota is like 10 million or something.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So do you think it'll be a high goal and miss and still be great, kind of like the timing for some of his stuff? What do you think?
So I'm on the camp, and I think this is sort of a small camp, but I really think 20 million by 2030 is legitimate. And the reason why is sort of I draw the parallel to what happened with the 500,000 units by 2020 that they laid out in 2014. That people thought was absolutely bananas. This was around the time they were making somewhere between 200 to 50,000 cars a year. And people are like, there's no way. That means a freaking 50% CAGR growth for the next 6-7 years. No one else has ever done that. Lo and behold, they hit it. And that was completely mind-blowing. So when it comes to large-scale manufacturing goals, it seems like Tesla has a track record to hit those goals, to hit those goals. Tesla is going to be selling into a fleet of cars that's about 1.4 billion cars large, where 97% of those are gas cars. And within that context, 20 million EVs sold to replace 1.4 billion gas cars is quite small still. So they have the TAM, the total addressable market, to grow into. I think the compact car will be the biggest variable for them to get there, the sort of cheaper car. And if we think about how Tesla is going to be building that car, it's going to be about 50% the size and the cost of the Model 3, Model Y-ish. And the footprint of the factory is going to be able to allow them to create 2 times more cars than the existing 3Y. So that's a 4x factor, right? Ish. So they'll be able to do 4 times the amount of cars out of one factory with a compact car versus a Model 3 and a Y, which means that you need 1/4 of the factories to create the same number of compact cars versus a Model 3 and a Model Y. And if you put that for the next few years, if you say, okay, how many more factories does Tesla need to build to get to, say, 20 million capacity with those numbers in mind, that's 5 or 6 more factories. That's 1 factory a year that they have to announce and build. And they're on that cadence. They announced Giga Mexico, which is supposed to break ground here in the next month or two. And then as long as they announce at least 1 more factory per year, why wouldn't they hit it, right? It just becomes a question of price. Are people going to be willing to pay whatever price Tesla demands for that car? But they've made it very clear that their goal is to advance sustainable EVs as much as humanly possible. So they're going to lead that effort quite strongly. So I think they'll get there. Worst case scenario, they'll reach 15 million, even 13 million, or even 10 million in 2030. But they'll hit 20 million not long thereafter, because they're still going to be on an exponential growth curve as they build out these factories for these compact cars. So that's how I think about it. You tell me if I'm bananas. Do you think I'm bananas, Cory?
I wouldn't say bananas. That makes sense to me. And it's just, you look at the macroeconomic scenario. So we have to avoid a long-term major recession,
Sure.
any major wars. You know, there could be things that, what do they call a black swan event that we don't know of, you know? So if things stay rather stable, actually, I prefer we go into a recession and get out of it, because we've been in limbo for a while, just so we can get moving past that. So barring any of that, I see 13 million, 11 to 13 million on the low end. Like, I'd be disappointed, but that would make sense to me. And the manufacturing ramp up for this small vehicle and the demand globally, that's kind of the wild card. But I think they're set up to win that battle.
Yeah. I think how that car progresses and how that car ramps from, say, it producing the first car until 2027 will give us a good idea if 20 million is actually legitimately a target that Tesla's going to reach. So, it's good to hear your take. It's good to hear your take. I agree. I agree with what you're saying.
Yeah, and do the math on 20 million. So 20 million vehicles, the average sale price will probably drop because the compact car will be cheaper. So I think that even though the compact car could sell for $25,000, I think the average configuration will sell in the low 30s, because people will probably buy higher end features. Some will be FSD, all sorts of different paint colors and seats, you know, whatever. Then you'll introduce the Cybertruck, which will be more expensive. So I think the average sale price, the average vehicle price, probably low 40s, mid 40s, low 40s. It'll come down, I believe. So do the math on that. Eric, you got a calculator? You're sitting over there. What's 20 million times, let's say, 45,000? What is that? $1 trillion. 900 billion. I think it's 900 billion.
It's a lot of money.
I'm asking him to do the math. 45,000 times 2 million. 900 billion.
Yeah, that's 900. Yeah.
Almost $1 trillion. Yeah. So that's a prediction I will make. I think Tesla will be the first $1 trillion revenue OEM. I'll say that.
Yeah. Hey, are you including full self-driving revenue in that?
Yeah, that's everything.
Okay.
Yeah, because they're at what 75 billion, so they're at 0.075 trillion, not even 0.1 trillion. Look at that, we're talking in trillions now. Yeah.
Big numbers. I really do think, I think Tesla's sort of long-term advantage, and I would love to get your take on this because I've been thinking about this a lot. I think in the EV market, Tesla, maybe BYD, and a few others are really going to control what we would call the affordable sort of down market segment, where they're going to be able to create really affordable cars for the population. And then the higher price brackets are going to be controlled by, say, your traditional legacy automakers, at the higher price bracket.
BMW, Mercedes, Audi. Yeah.
How do you think about that?
Well, I think the survivability of the premium brands is very easy. So whether that's a hypercar or a luxury car, that's a small percentage of the population that will want to differentiate themselves from a brand for the masses. So Tesla is a premium car now, right? They're like a luxury vehicle in most instances based on their price and their class and their size, especially the Model S and the X and even the Y at the high end. But if you introduce this compact car, it's more the Model T. Think about it. It's the vehicle that everyone should and can be able to afford. And I think you'll see people in the premium market want to differentiate themselves buying, other vehicles. Even if a Tesla is a better vehicle, they'll want to buy the BMW 7 Series or a Mercedes S550 or whatever the equivalent large vehicle is. So to answer your question, I think the luxury traditional players will be fine. But VW, Ford, and General Motors, they are essentially brands for the masses. Now, yes, Ford has Lincoln, GM has GMC, the Denali series, and they have Cadillac, those higher end brands can offer these, but they're typically variations off of their core models. Like some of the Cadillacs are derivatives of the lower end models where they have, a GMC or a Chevy off of the same platform. And so it'll be interesting, but I think the luxury end will be fine. But if you're the VWs of the world and you can't make a competitive product to compete with that low cost Tesla, it could mean major contraction for that company.
Yeah, right. That's kind of the vibe I'm getting. Some of the verbiage out of Jim Farley at the quarter one earnings report was sort of alluding to this, where they talked about growth at all costs is not going to be part of the EV strategy for Ford, which kind of tells me that, hey, so maybe, I mean, they're making negative 102% margin on their EVs, and I would understand why that wouldn't be. I mean, they're already losing money on the car. They can't afford really to win on price. They have to win on some other measure until they can get their scale up to be able to produce EVs in a mass market manner. But how long is that going to take? And what are the demands from the public? Yeah. And is Ford going to be aligned to be able to do that? Right? It's such a complex situation. It's just feels so transitional in nature.
Are you familiar with the Netflix Blockbuster story about how Blockbuster had a meeting with Netflix, I think Reed Hastings, early on, and so Blockbuster had the opportunity to buy Netflix for some small amount. I think it was $2 million or $20 million, something like that. And they essentially laughed. They laughed them out of the room. And now Netflix is a behemoth, and Blockbuster is gone. I said, so has that Blockbuster moment already happened? So back when Tesla was tiny, the large OEMs just dismissed them. Nah, not a player, irrelevant, don't care, not a player, irrelevant, too small, blah, And now it's to the point where it's reached that Netflix momentum. And it's like, do you think Tesla, so my question for you, do you think Tesla will reach the point where they could actually buy a small OEM, buy a traditional OEM, or to take over that?
Yeah, I think they'll definitely get to that point. Them wanting to do it is a completely different question, because then that means taking on all those assets, right, that are kind of obsolete. But yeah, I 100% think that's going to be the case. I mean, it's the innovator's dilemma. It's the innovator's dilemma to a T. It's Xerox, Nokia, Blockbuster, BlackBerry. You go down the list of all these giant players in the business corporate world that were disrupted out of existence. And I think for some automakers, the momentum is we're too far into the game for them to be able to reverse course. I can make my predictions on who those automakers are going to be, but I don't want to, because I want to make sure that I'm rooting for them to succeed. I want as many EV makers as humanly possible. But if you don't have the right chips in place, if you're not making the right bets now, it's going to be too late. We're too far down the path for these guys to decide to get into the game. So and Sandy talks about this often, and this is Sandy's one of the ones that really has explained this phenomena beautifully. Is if you're starting now, you're too late. You're too late. If you're not far ahead enough in the game today, where you can at least rival Tesla in the mid segment in some way with meaningful volume, you're probably too late as well. But you could still make some headway by taking some large bets and hoping that you have a product line that resonates with the consumer and offers the technology that the customer is going to demand in this decade, which is going to be heavily geared towards software and autonomy. So if you can't do that, then you might be in trouble as well. So yeah. We'll see, man. They'll definitely be able to buy them, but I don't know if they'll want to.
Yeah, so it's an exciting time to be to be covering all of these transitions and all these companies.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think the next probably decade will be wildly entertaining as we see the rise and the fall of different companies, and it's really exciting to be alive right now. All right, I think I got to wrap things up. Eric's looking at me holding a piece of paper.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate you coming
2
on.
minutes.
Coming on the show, Farzad. It's great as always. You're also one of my favorite people to follow on Twitter. So if you're out there listening or watching, follow Farzad on Twitter. Get him to 100,000 followers. I think you're at 76, 78,000. And your handle is you say your handle. It's at Farzad Mesbahi. Is it your just name?
It's at Farziness, Farzyness, yeah, which is my gamer tag from when I was 10. I haven't changed it, man. I used to beat people's butts in Counter-Strike with that handle.
Oh, that's funny. Awesome. Well,
awesome, man. I appreciate you, man.
Yep. Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate you as always as well. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Truly an honor. Love Munro. Love you. Love Sandy. And yeah, can't wait to speak to you next time, man. Thank you so much.
Talk to you later.